Welcome to the I Am the Worst Parent Ever podcast with Nicole Merritt and Dr. Robert Zeitlin.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Good, good. So I was thinking about all the things that you're doing and all the things that I'm doing, and I'm thinking that one reason that we get along so well is because we kind of share this like superpower of persistence. Like we're not gonna let it. Anyway, you wrote something about that recently?
Yes, were you gonna say not gonna let it go? Because you must have been talking to my husband. I definitely have a problem of not letting things go. But yes, I did write an article recently, and I'm gonna use the word fudgin for our audience, but I wrote an article.
By the way, I never use the word fudgin, but you threw that in about an article you wrote about my book, and you changed all the F words to fudgin, and I'm like, okay, I guess I say fudgin now.
Well, because so many social media platforms will not allow that to be shared or boosted if it has the profanity.
Including this podcast. We're not cursing on this podcast.
Right. So see, and you know what? I would never, and I do never curse in front of my children. I don't agree with that. But when I write and I feel that it's appropriate and worthy, for me, it's almost like an actor when he's acting. Like I need to get my message across. And so I'm not ashamed to use it in my writing, and my kids don't read anything I write that contains it. But yes, so the article I wrote for Blunt Moms, and it's called Fudging Persist. How's that for a new life motto? And it's just something that I guess I've become more aware of. Like maybe as I was doing it, I wasn't quite aware of just how it was helping me get to, my next steps in life and grow as a person. But persisting is the way to go. Would you agree?
I would agree. I don't know if it's something I control or it's just something I wake up and have to do. I think it's like, we just talked about showing up and just being there, just constantly. And sometimes you said even to the degree that you think you're kind of annoying people.
Yes, but see, you just said you don't think that you are making the choice, but I think that you are. I think that every day when you get out of the bed and tackle the 80 million things that you need to tackle, that is you being like, I'm gonna own the day. And even when you don't own one day, you wake up the next day and own it, that is still persistence.
Yeah, here's how persistence has changed for me. Persistence has become, instead of like a shotgun effort of like trying to do everything, of how do I persistently do the same thing I know I need to do every day? Like, we talked about meditating in another conversation. Meditating is one of them. But more importantly, for me, how do I do whatever routine I need to do to get to the chair and have that valuable time to actually write and create something? Like that's persistence.
Right.
That's the new focused sort of version of persistence that's helping me.
Right. And then, persistence for me is kind of just not giving into any wallowing or, disappointment and guilt. Yes, I will make a mistake. I will yell when I shouldn't yell and feel guilty about it. But I usually only feel guilty for like 10 minutes and then I persist on to be the better parent that I want to be. The same goes for writing and getting a rejection. Like it fires me up to submit again and submit something better and improve. I think I just created this meme yesterday that I was like, I'm so proud of it, but because I feel like it's so true and so important. And it was like, carry a dream so big that you barely fit in the room, but be so humble that you're always invited in. And I swear, like, that's just like, I just think like that's a great life motto. Like, yeah.
I love that. Just the first part, before we even get to the second part, the first part about dreaming big, which is something that's just so hard to do. Like, it's so hard to allow ourselves to do. For me, for a long time, I'd take off little bites of dreams instead of like really, I, I think there's something inside me that's very ambitious, but also cautious. So like dreaming big, having a dream you can barely fit in the room is an awesome vision. That's an awesome visual for me.
Right, but I think what will set you apart from, even if it's not that many people that also have a dream that big, what's going to set you apart is that there are sadly going to be those that are not humble about it.
Right.
That, you know, that will look at you when you walk in the room and say, "What are you doing here?" And for you not to be one of those people and to be like, "Oh, come in, yes, let's have big dreams together." I mean, that's just, to me, like the be all end all.
So tell me what you mean by humble then. So if getting a rejection letter fires you up and makes you want to send out 2 submissions the next day,
Right.
What's humble about that, or how does that feel? How are you carrying it humbly?
I guess it's that I'm not submitting them with the like you know how or when I get the rejection, I'm not like, how dare did you not enjoy what I wrote? Like that's not what I'm going at it with, and I'm not approaching it with, you have to love everything I write. I guess humbly just means I'm going to keep, and every time like I send a submission somewhere, I respectfully submit this, and with respect, I'm going to keep submitting to you. You know, it's always done with, I don't know, from a place of just kindness and genuine, I want to be a part of your community. I don't know. Does that make sense?
It does. I mean, it's starting to reflect. I realize as I asked the question, you're kind of answering what was in my head, which is I grew up with a mom who was incredibly persistent, actually to the point of like not caring if she was pissing some people off and like pushing really hard because she had things she wanted to see happen, you know, change in the world, you know, social justice, etc. And so I grew up with that model of persistence. How do you feel like being persistent is playing out for you as a mom and with your kids?
I mean, I think it's what keeps me going every day. It keeps the forefront of what I, want, and what every parent, I believe, wants, is to raise well-rounded children who are intelligent but kind, who are funny but know when to be serious, who have the ability to banter, who can can trust their inner voice, and know when it's appropriate to speak out loud, but to also fail and not, sulk and bury yourself in a hole and keep going. And I don't know, for me, so if I have to exemplify that as a parent every day when I spill the milk for the 10th time and then the dog poops on the floor, like, I can get mad for a second, but then I got to pick it up and keep going, because that's a life trait that I want them to have.
Right. I think the last 2 things you described, wanting for them, trusting their inner voice, and also being okay with failure, feels like such an uphill battle in the way that everyone else wants us to raise our kids.
Yeah.
Like the trust the inner voice one, for instance, like I realized that I was like helping the school and coaches and everyone sort of beat my kids into submission that they should be compliant, good team players, etc. And then I realized that I want, at the end of the day, kids who do trust their gut, not over like, oh, I need to push down that thought because my teacher is telling me they want X or Y. Like, I actually need them to be aware and look around and figure out what's going on in the world, not just blindly follow.
Right, but that also involves you. I mean, I am very much a rule follower, and the teacher says raise your hand, you raise your hand, sort of stuff. There's a way to teach them to use it appropriately. I wrote a while ago, an article called "Dear Little Girl with the Smart Mouth" about my daughter, and not smart mouth in like the bad sense of the word. But that there's certain rules about using your voice. You never use them to speak hate. That's a given. But that's not what every parent is relaying when we ourselves are walking around spewing, hateful things about the person in line in front of us, or the driver that just, kind of cut us off. it's definitely important to be modeling that. And yes, I agree. There has to be you have to trust your inner voice, but know how to appropriately relay your feelings and your thoughts.
Right. It's a balancing act. And I worry that kids are, I don't want to say too young, but don't necessarily see all the things that we're doing to balance those things. And how does that play out? Like, if you have a kid who's a rule follower, like a really strong rule follower, like I had one kid who came home from school once the kid started cursing, and he's like, okay, I need you to list out the things I'm going to get in trouble for here. Like, give me a poster. Like, you know, you go to the airport and there's a TSA poster and it's like, don't bring this or this or this on the plane, right? He wanted a TSA poster. Like, tell me what I'm going to get in trouble for, because I'm not going to be that kid. And just tell me where the line is, please. And, you know, black and white thinking like that, it's like, at some point, for a lot of kids, that's what it is. I think for a lot of adults, that's what it is. But I think the balancing act you just said is like, how do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, and I was one of those kids, and I still like somebody to tell me, you know, what you can and cannot do, so that I make sure I don't do the wrong thing. But I guess at the same time, and I'm sure, and maybe not, but I'm sure your child and me, I eventually inadvertently crossed that line and learned from experience. And then you learn, okay, well, I made a mistake, but look, it didn't turn out all that, you know, all that bad. And not to say, I mean, there's definitely some kids will then go, oh, okay, I'll keep making these mistakes because it doesn't turn out that bad. But eventually you will learn, and experience is just, it's necessary.
Yeah, and I think sometimes we fight against that experience for our kids over, like, I know a kid who's like terrified of bees, right? So then eventually he stops going outside, you know, in the spring and the summer. And it's just like, if he only would like dance with a bee, wave it away, get stung and find out he's not going to die. You know, it's like, if you got past that, like you said, the experience would change everything. But like, sometimes how do you get that experience if you're really scared of the rules, or it seems really, really dangerous to speak up and like admit that you're behind or whatever.
Right. And that's when I think you either have to have somebody, like if you're an adult and you're the one that's afraid of the bees, you have to have somebody to have, whether it's in your family and your spouse, or like how I'm talking to you, somebody to talk it out. And if it's your child, you talk it out, or maybe you exemplify, like, you know, mommy is afraid of heights, but here I am up on this ladder trying to look at that bee with you, you know? So I think you have to find a way to, whether it's through experience or conversation, try to help slowly take those steps to move yourself past it.
Yeah, I think that's huge. And you know that because I've written about that, and that's something that we talked about. You know, I think the idea, first off, of noticing, parents noticing when, you know, catching yourself and having that observing eye, but also taking calculated risks, you know, putting yourself out there in front of your kids. You know, that's the other thing we do, is we hide all this stuff from our kids, because mostly because we're afraid to show our flaws, but also, you know, for some, you know, trumped up reason that there's like, you know, they'll be traumatized if they see me laugh, or, you know, if my kid's a teenager and I share any stories from my youth that were sort of like reckless or dangerous things, like that's going to somehow give them permission. And that's just out of bounds. I can't do that. I can't expose that part. Kids are, I mean, if anyone remembers being a kid, you don't get the wool pulled over your eyes that easily. You actually see everything that's going on. So how do we get parents to be a little bit more transparent and a little bit more courageous with sharing that stuff?
Right. And you just made me think of, so something that happened the other day. One of my kids was playing on the computer, and I had said, close the computer. They didn't. Close the computer. They didn't. I got closer and closer, and I knew they were hearing me. Close the computer. And then finally I closed the computer because the computer wasn't closed. And they said to me that they didn't hear me. And I knew that that was a flat out lie, because they looked me right in my eye when I said it. So this went on and on, trying to keep up the lie. tears, like the I'm not lying tears, Finally, I went to another place with it. I mean, I was frustrated, I was upset, but I went to another place with it. And I said, you know what? I've been you. I've been on the computer. And my mom and dad had come to tell me to close it. And I didn't close it because I wanted to finish what I was doing. And just kind of sharing that, I eventually got the truth. And then when I got the truth, they got a hug. And then I said, look what happened. You just told the truth. And now what is mommy doing? And they said, hugging me. And I said, yep. You thought you would be in more trouble, but you're not. But it's taking the time to go there.
It's taking the time to go there, and then it's having your wits about you. And I applaud you for, at the end of it, like remembering that this is a lesson time, not an aha, I caught you time, and
right.
Time to get that, all that built up resentment that you have from whatever other experiences where people lied to you, and you're like, oh, I knew you were lying. It's like, you can see so many parents just like going off at that point, but instead you kept it a teachable moment. That's really cool.
Yes, and I have had many aha moments where it has not been teachable. I swear, one time my kids were in the bath and I told them to unplug the drain like it's time to get out, and somebody replugged it, and nobody would own up to being the one who replugged it. And it was like 6 months later, and then we were like, I forget, laughing about something. I'm like, you unplugged the drain, didn't you? Or you replugged the drain. And they were like, yep.
They didn't get a hug, did they?
No. But we got a laugh, so that's just as fair, I think.
I think even better sometimes. Yeah, so that'll be another conversation about how do we get more laughter in our houses. But
yeah,
so,
I think with parenting, with marriage, with your self-improvement, with your mindfulness, with your job, whatever it is, you just keep persisting, because in my mind, there is no alternative. If I don't persist, what am I going to do? I'm going to lay in bed. I'm going to crawl in a hole. Like, I can't go there. Like, I'm too much of a busybody that's sulking in my own, melancholiness or frustration. It gets you nowhere.
So what's your biggest obstacle to persistence?
A little bit of time right now, which sounds so, I feel like, I'm the martyr of time. Like, I have no time. That, and then, I don't know, I would say a little bit of fear creeps in now and then, like fear of judgment, meaning it like that. Like, what will people think of me? What will they say of me? Will I blow it? But I don't feel like, at least right now, and for me, it's turning 30 really helped, and I don't know why. I've just kind of come into my own a little bit, and I'm not really apologizing for who I am. So I don't know.
It's funny that we met now, because I feel like the same thing happened to me around 50. Like, that change for me, Stephen Pressfield wrote this book, talked about going pro. And it's like, at that point, like, all that persistent energy that was going out in a million places, like, started to come in. And now I realize the challenge is actually, not having go in 3 different directions, but actually focus on one thing at a time, and I think that's my biggest challenge to persistence, is I have so many irons in the fire and so many things going on that I think I've made it a fight in the past that I can only do one thing, or I'm kind of messing myself up if I do all these other things. And now I'm starting to think like an air traffic controller, that I just need to tell the planes to get in line, and I can only land one in June, and then maybe another one in July, and we need to space them out. And they're not going to evaporate, and they're not going to go away. And I'm actually not going to disappoint people or let them down if I actually tell them, that interview I want to do with you because I want to write that article, can we do that a little later? They're 100% on board. So I think that's my biggest obstacle to persistence, was myself, obviously, sort of getting in my own way, but now, like, thinking like an air traffic controller as opposed to a school teacher, like, sitting over my head saying, focus on one thing.
Right. But then I think naturally, whatever we're enjoying the most and is bringing us as much, passion and feel good, we're going to just naturally gravitate towards doing that more and putting our focus there. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing.
No, I don't think it's a bad thing. I think there's times in the past where, you know, a part of me went and found something more exciting and fun to do. And like, because I was getting scared about like finishing something. So I left that 80% done. And I said, I really need to focus on this new thing. And there's times where that sort of like, not fake persistence, but fake sort of gut feeling like you described, that I learned sometimes to trust that and sometimes to look behind the curtain and see if there was some other agenda that maybe I call it lizard brain, that maybe my lizard brain was actually sort of drawing my attention away with.
I think we'll have to talk about lizard brain in a whole other episode, so I learned about this.
Oh, definitely. We'll definitely be talking about lizard brain.
Oh, this has been awesome chatting again.
Yeah, great talking to you.
Okay, talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to the I Am the Worst Parent Ever podcast. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss an episode.